Hi, this is Henry Nacino. I'm an architect on the Google Health deployment team. And in this short video, I am going to talk about how to create and access Cloud Datalab instances that do not have a public IP address attached to them. So in this slide, basically, we're going to see the flow of a developer who's wanting to connect to a Datalab instance that, as you can see here at the top, does not have a external or public IP address associated with that instance, that VM instance. So in this case, what's going to happen when the developer issues the Datalab connect command, it's going to go ahead and look and see that the Datalab instance does not have an external IP address. Therefore, it's going to look for another route. In this case, the route is going to be Cloud IAP, and it's going to go try to tunnel the SSH traffic through Cloud IAP or Cloud Internet Identity Access Identity Aware Proxy, and then it's going to tunnel it, and it's going to try to hit the Datalab instance, and we have to make sure that we have a firewall rule in place that allows traffic from Cloud IAP to that Datalab instance. So before we create the instance, let's just take a look at the current state of my project, the VPCs, and the firewalls, and then we will go ahead and create an instance without a public IP address. So So here we're looking at the instances. So I currently have one Datalab instance, which is not running at the moment. And as you notice here, this instance also does not have an external IP address. It's showing as none. Also, and actually, let me just blow this up just so people can see it a little better. So again, it does not have an external IP address. I'm going to go ahead and create another Datalab instance to show you the process. And then let's take a look at the underlying network that that instance is running on. So if I go to VPCs, you're going to see that Datalab, when you create the first Datalab instance, it will automatically create a Datalab network VPC. And in my case, I was putting my instances in US Central 1. So if I look at that specific subnet, I just want to point out that I have private Google access turned on. And by default, that is turned off. But in order to enable this scenario, we have to turn it on, because if I do not have a public IP address on my Datalab instance, now I cannot get out to any of the resources such as BigQuery, Google BigQuery, or Google Cloud Storage from this Datalab instance, because those API endpoints are public endpoints over the public internet. But by enabling this, I'm saying, no, I don't want to go to the public internet, but I do want to allow my instances with only private IP addresses to go ahead and access those resources, those GCP cloud resources on the private Google network. So that's the first configuration that needs to be turned on to get this to work. The second configuration is the firewalls itself. So again, going back to this view, so when the traffic tunneled through the SSH traffic tunneled through IAP tries to get to the Cloud Datalab instance, I have to allow traffic from IAP to come to my Datalab instance. And the way I do that is by this firewall rule, where I allow ingress traffic from this source over this protocol, over this port to hit this instance or any of the Datalab instances that I want to configure this rule for. So if I look at that specific rule, so this rule I created manually beforehand. And if I bring this up, you can see that the direction is ingress. The target are instances that have a tag called Datalab. And by default, all Datalab instances will have that tag. This is the address that I need to configure for source or incoming traffic from my IAP or Identity Aware Process. And then the protocol I'm allowing, TCP port 22. So with those two configurations, I can go ahead and create a new instance. So let me just go ahead and grab a command, and we'll go through what that syntax is. And let me go ahead and paste that command in here. And so what I'm doing here is this is the Datalab create command, and I'm specifying the name of my new instance, Datalab 3, specifying a specific zone because remember the subnet that I had configured private access turned on is for US Central. So I want to make sure I place this Datalab instance on that specific zone. And then I'm basically saying I don't want a public IP address on this Datalab instance. So I'm saying no external IP. And then for this, I'm not going to connect to it right away. After it creates it, I'm going to just let it create. And then kind of afterwards, I'm going to go ahead and connect to it with the Datalab connect command. So let me go ahead and kick this off, and I will pause the video after this because this could take I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes maybe. So instead of waiting here, I'll just let it kind of give me the first prompt here, which is basically asking me, do I want to continue because there are other firewall rules already in place on the Datalab network? And yes, I do want to continue. And then now it's going to create the information. It's going to create the firewall rule. So the default firewall rule, and I'll show you what this looks like after it's done, is the default firewall rule is basically to allow all traffic into all SSH traffic into Datalab. But because we want to limit this just to the IAP, the SSH traffic traveling through or tunnel through IAP, we're going to get rid of this rule that it's creating automatically. So now it's going through and creating the Datalab instance itself, Datalab 3, and then it's going to, before that completes, it's also going to provision some disks. Okay, so now the instance has been created. And before we can actually go and connect to it, let's just go ahead and just take a look of what has happened. So first, let's go ahead and refresh, and you'll see that it automatically creates this firewall rule. Again, this is allowing SSH traffic to hit any, um, well, SSH traffic to any VM on my Data Lab network. So I don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And then let's go ahead and take a look at our VM. Let's just make sure this deletes. All right, now let's take a look at our VMs. And we see our Datalab 3 instance is up and running. So now we can come back here and do the Datalab connect, Datalab 3. And again, if we look at this, notice it does not have an external IP address. And notice when I issue this command, it's actually going to say something to the effect of trying to connect SSH, trying to connect SSH, but it's gonna basically indicate that it didn't see a external IP address, so it's gonna go with the alternative route to try to tunnel this SSH traffic through IAP. So let's go ahead and run that. Okay, here we go. It says external IP address was not found, defaulting to using IAP tunneling. So I'll let this run a little bit, but I might just pause this video and come back when it's complete. Again, I think this was a step that might take up to 5 minutes the first time we connect to it. Okay, so after about 3.5 minutes, it came back and the last kind of notification was that the connection is now open and you can connect to Datalab at localhost 8081. So I'll go ahead and do that. So there's our Datalab instance. Again, I don't have any notebooks in here right now, but just as a test, just to make sure we can get to other GCP resources, let me create a new notebook, and I'm going to go ahead and paste a big query and run that. And again, the first time it connects out through private access, again, this might take a little bit of time, and then all the times after that, it's quick. And actually, this was fairly quick as well the first time. So there we go. It just proved that from a Datalab instance without a private IP address, I was able to access BigQuery, which typically you would need to go out to the internet to, but because we turned private access on, we're able to connect to BigQuery without a public IP address on this instance. So just to review, if we're gonna go back and look at this again, so we have Datalab 3, this is the new instance we just created. It has no external IP address. We're looking at our VPC network, and we can see that we have our Datalab network, which is the default network for Datalab instances that you create. In my case, I'm putting my instances on the central region, and I was able to access my BigQuery resource because this was turned on private Google access. Okay, then if we go to firewalls, again, I deleted it automatically. Every time you create a Datalab instance, it automatically will create a firewall rule to allow all source IP addresses, TCP/22 access to any of the Datalab instances. I deleted the automatically created firewall and I replaced that with my restricted firewall, which only allows traffic from IAP or Identity Aware Proxy for SSH traffic to be tunneled through that to get to my Datalab instance. All right, so that concludes. Again, this is a quick summary of what was configured and what was done as a user tried to connect to a Datalab instance with no private IP address on that particular instance.